This is Warren County's premier alternative radio station, KSTM, Simpson College, Indianola, Iowa, the new Storm Radio, 88.9.
Hello and welcome back to A Dorm Divided. It's March 10th here at Simpson College on 88.9 KSTM, The Storm. I'm Jake Brend. With me today is Aaron Price. Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Got to give credit where credit's due. Aaron picked up a huge win. I guess the Simpson men's tennis team picked up a huge win over Cornell, first time in 15 years. But it would not have happened without Aaron's massive, 6-2, 6-3?
Yep.
6-2, 6-3 victory at the number 2 singles spot. We played them back in the fall, and they beat us 5-4. So Aaron's win over their number 2 singles is what flipped it from 4-5 to 5-4. So huge win for the Simpson men's tennis team.
That's right.
And we're going to be diving into some March Madness talk, but I guess I just thought of this, and we should talk about what the Simpson women's basketball team's doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7 in the country, number 1 seed in the ARC tournament. Last night they rolled through Luther. Jenna Taylor had 31 points, just annihilated the Norse.
Yeah, I watched, I guess I didn't watch, but I was keeping track on Twitter, and it looked like Luther was kind of keeping it close to them through the first half. And I think that's what they did the first game. Those guys played too.
And the first game they kept it close longer than the first half. Like it was 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and it was like a 1-point game. But one thing I noticed when watching the game is Luther's a lot better than their 1-9 record shows.
Mm-hmm.
They picked up their first win of the season just on Sunday against Nebraska Wesleyan, and Wesleyan only had 6 players. And they just, I don't know what it is. They're a good passing team. So I think that plays well against Simpson's press.
Yeah.
So like Simpson was trying to trap them in the corner like every time they inbounded, and they were able to just kind of throw it down court, get a quick 3, and then at halftime, Coach Brian Nemeth, who is incredible, made some good adjustments, and Simpson rolled.
Yep.
Do you remember Javon Carter from West Virginia?
Yeah. He was bald.
Yep, bald guy.
Bald.
That's exactly who Kaya Rasmussen reminds me of. Just because like she kind of leads the press as just kind of like the pit bull point guard up front, and that's exactly what Javon Carter did, and he drove me crazy for 4 years as an Iowa State fan. He was fun to watch, but when he was playing your team, you just wanted to hit him the whole time. But yeah, Simpson will be back with a game against Central tomorrow with a chance to go to the ARC Conference Championship, and it won't be against Wartburg because Wartburg, the number 4 team in the country, after losing at home to Simpson last week, ended up losing at home again to Loris and got upset. So I guess that's where March kicks in.
Yep.
You can never know what to expect in March.
Exactly.
And we are going to get into some awesome March Madness talk. It's conference championship time, and honestly, I think that mid-major conference championships are better than the Power 5 conference championships, but I do not know enough about any of the mid-major teams to talk about them, and that's what conference championship week is for.
Yeah, they're just a little bit more exciting because they have a lot more to play for because a lot of those mid-major schools, only the team that wins it gets into the tournament. So you see them be more aggressive. And you see them play their best basketball that time of year because they all want to make it. I think Power 5 kind of invokes the same thing. Everyone wants to win it. There's not as much of a drive if you already have a lock in the tournament, but you see some teams, some lower seeded teams in Power 5 conferences give it their all, and you see their seniors go all out, and they give a fight. I mean, they'll give a fight every single time. So that's always fun. You never know what's going to happen. But yeah, it's a great lead up to the NCAA tournament.
And I think it really depends on the league. So
Yeah.
like the Big 12, even if Kansas and Iowa State aren't the 2 best teams in the country, when they play in the championship in Kansas City, which will not be happening this year, if they play in the championship in Kansas City, each team has a 2-hour drive. It means a little something different than when Florida and Kentucky play a championship game in Nashville. Like it just doesn't mean as much. And I know we're going to talk about him later in the show, but Steve Prohm, his last year at Murray State, they went undefeated in the regular season, lost in the championship to Belmont and didn't make the tournament. So that's kind of back to the point where mid-majors mean more.
Yeah.
This year, Drake is fortunate to have a pretty good regular season resume, but in most years, they might get left out of the tournament despite being undefeated in the middle of February, just because they lost their conference championship. So that does make mid-majors a little more fun, and it gives them that sense of urgency. And I know the two teams that I've adopted so far that we'll talk more about next week before we get into like our March Madness preview. But Oral Roberts, I'm a huge Oral Roberts fan out of the Summit League.
Yep.
They knocked off South Dakota State and North Dakota State, just destroyed them. They're probably going to be like a 13 seed, I would say. Going to be a trendy upset pick, and then Winthrop. Those are my two teams for the year. But we'll be able to talk about that more after we're able to dive into our brackets.
Yep.
Selection Sunday's in 4 days.
Yeah.
I cannot wait.
Coming right around. Yep.
5 days.
It's happening so fast. It's great.
I cannot wait. But before we get into Selection Sunday, we have to have our Power, 6 conference championships. So I've got it in the order of Big 12, Big 10, ACC, Big East, SEC, Pac-12, and I just kind of did that in the order of the knowledge I had about each conference because I watch a lot more Big 12 basketball than Pac-12 basketball.
Yeah.
But coming out of the Big 12, we're going to be sharing our, I'll be talking about my slight predictions for Iowa State, but for every conference, we'll be doing our champion and runner-up. So who do you have coming out of the Big 12, Aaron?
I have Baylor. I think that's kind of the obvious pick at this point. You saw them get beat once to Kansas, right? They got beat one time.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And that was also coming off of a COVID pause.
Yeah.
So it was an abnormal loss.
I think that's going to be a lot of people's favorite pick. I think I have them playing Kansas in the tournament, or Kansas in the championship.
Yep, Kansas is the 2 seed.
Yeah, so I had Kansas because I filled out on CBS a bracket for each Power 6 conference, and I had Kansas coming in, making the championship. They're hot right now. They're never a team, no matter how bad they are or what the record shows, you never want to count them out because they have great coaching. They usually have a couple really good seniors that have been in the program for quite some time. So I never like counting them out. But yeah, I got them two meeting, and I think Baylor comes around this time and beats them.
Yeah, Bill Self always has. I swear it's every year. It's almost like what we used to do with the Patriots. Like when it's not even NFL season, but I remember in probably 2016 or 17, the Patriots got destroyed on Monday Night Football by the Chiefs. And it was probably like week 6 or 7, and everyone was like, is this finally like the end of the Patriots? And then they come back out and win the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And every year Kansas just has like a week in January where they lose 2 or 3 straight games, and everyone counts them out. They might jump into the 20s in the rankings, and then by the end of the season, like right now they're ranked 11th in the AP poll, and they somehow still finish second in the Big 12.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't count out Kansas, but I actually have Texas Tech going to the championship. One, because I think they've got the most to play for of any of the. There's 7 teams in the Big 12 that are going to make the championship, that are going to make the tournament. TCU, K-State, Iowa State, their only shot is winning it, and they're not winning more than one game. Other than obviously one of the TCU, K-State has to win in the playing game, but they are going to lose to Baylor. So of the 7 teams that have something to play for, I think Texas Tech does because they've fallen probably to the 6th line in the tournament. And a Big 12 championship appearance, all by beating Baylor, would get them up to a 5 for sure, and maybe even a 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Chris Beard is just a good enough coach. Although they are cold, they've lost their last. They lost 2 games going into a game against Texas, and then they were able to beat TCU and Iowa State before losing to Baylor. And then they play Texas tomorrow night. And I think that will be a favorable matchup for them. They already beat Texas once this season. I think their other game got canceled because Tech was one of the teams that didn't make up their entire schedule. So they beat Texas twice actually. So I think Texas will go through that. Texas Tech will go through Texas, beat Kansas in the semifinal, but ultimately fall to Baylor.
Okay, yeah. I actually had Texas Tech beating Texas as well. I like them.
Losing to Kansas.
Yep. And then I have I think Oklahoma State's really good too. I really like watching Cade Cunningham. There's always those teams with good NBA prospects. He's obviously could be a number 1 overall pick. They play well in the tournament just because this is his final opportunity to showcase his skills. And so I think I had them beating West Virginia. And then I do think they give Baylor a good run, but
it's a shame that they ended up on that side of the bracket.
Yeah, because for sure if they would have been on the other side, it would have been hard for me not to put them in the championship because I really like them.
So that brings me back to one of my favorite basketball memories. My favorite basketball games I've ever been at. So I went to the Big 12 championship in 2014, the first year Iowa State won it since 2001. It was the Melvin Ejim, DeAndre Kane, Niang team. So we went to all 3 days, but the first day was Iowa State, K-State, and then after that was Marcus Smart and Oklahoma State against Kansas. And that was the year where Oklahoma State lost 7 in a row. Marcus Smart pushed the fan in the stands. Do you know what I'm talking about? So they were an 8 seed and ended up playing 1 seed Kansas, and the game went to overtime. And that's what I'm hoping for tomorrow, where you get the star freshman, or in that case, Smart was a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
But you get that star player against the best team in the league, and that's what I'm hoping. It's just a close game in Kansas City. And it's also worth noting, Kansas City is allowing fans, not that many, but Baylor's never one to travel as it is.
Yeah.
So that's where, in a year like this, it doesn't really matter, but Iowa State always has the advantage over any team other than Kansas for the most part. But Iowa State could have 50,000 fans tomorrow, and I guess
think
tonight,
it's not
really going to matter. Yeah, they play against Oklahoma. I mean, it's more favorable than Texas Tech, which is originally who they were supposed to play until the Big 12 had some weird rule with how many games both teams played. And it's more favorable than Texas Tech, but no chance they win. On to the Big 10. I'll talk first because I know you have more to say about the Big 10. You're going to hate me, but I've got Illinois over Michigan. I think Illinois is the hottest team in the country right now. Illinois just came out 2 weeks ago and destroyed Michigan on their home court. So I think Illinois carries that momentum in. Both teams have locked up a 1 seed, in my opinion, unless Iowa. I think Iowa's the only one who has a chance to steal a 1 seed, and they would have to beat both those teams pretty bad for one of them to fall off. So I think both those teams have kind of locked up the 1 seed, but Illinois in their last 3 games, won at Wisconsin, won at Michigan, won at Ohio State. So 3 straight road wins, and that could come back to bite them just because they've been traveling on the road for a while. But in their bracket, they will be taking on the winner of this keeps popping up. They'll be taking on the winner of Indiana-Rutgers. Shouldn't be a problem. Iowa will, in my opinion, take care of Wisconsin, and then they'll play in the semifinals. And then on the other side of the bracket, which I think will be more interesting, you've got Ohio State most likely taking on Purdue in the semifinal. And Ohio State's the lower seed, even though they've been in the top 10 for the majority of the season. So I'm guessing we'll get an Ohio State-Michigan matchup in the semifinal. And then from there, I mean, those are 4 of the top 10 teams in the country. So
yeah. Yep. I have Michigan beating Iowa. I will say this though. I will agree. I do think Iowa has the best chance to knock off Illinois. Something that they went into Illinois, played extremely well. Should have won a game if Nunji grabs a rebound. They had a chance to win it at Illinois. So I think that's something that's been fueling them for quite some time. And I do think that they beat Illinois. I also think Rutgers beats Indiana and gives Illinois a run for their money. I don't know. I like Illinois, but there's just something about them that they're really good. They got really good guards. There's just something about them. I think they're going to have close games. And I think Iowa's experience comes out on top this time. And then I have Michigan beating Iowa just because Michigan, they just outmatch Iowa pretty much in every way.
Iowa doesn't match up well against Michigan because Michigan has so many big guys.
Yeah.
They
can throw at you, yeah.
The problem that Iowa runs into, if they play against a team that has one good big man, that big man has to be hesitant because he can't pick up fouls But Michigan's got like 4 just identical big men. So if one dude fouls out, it's not really going to mean much. You can throw more at Garza than, say, Kofi.
Because Kofi's going to be guarding Luka the whole time, and he has trouble with fouls as it is. And
let alone against the national player of the year.
Yeah, so Luka is going to eat that up. And I'm not saying that's going to be the determining factor because Illinois has really good guards, but it does come down to make a big difference. But a thing to note is if Michigan and Michigan State play, that is going to be one of the best games in the Big Ten tournament because Michigan State, just like Kansas, is a team you see fall off, wasn't even supposed to be in the tournament. Now all of a sudden is almost a lock. I mean, they're on the outside, they're in the bubble, but they're not as they shouldn't be as worried as most other teams. They just, if they beat Maryland, which is their first round game, and maybe play a close game with Michigan, they've found themselves in the NCAA tournament. But they also have beaten Michigan already, so they're another team that they switched up their starting lineup when they weren't playing very well, and it's come out to help them. They have a guy named Aaron Henry who's been playing extremely well, and that's who they've been building their offense around. So I also think they're going to be a team to watch as well. But yeah, I have Michigan defeating Iowa and being Big Ten tournament champions.
And that's the last game before Selection Sunday, so I always love watching the Big Ten championship, but I also hate it because I'm just like, get to Selection Sunday.
Yeah,
and then
it doesn't really matter. Both teams are locks. We just want to watch
this is going to be the first time in my life where I'm going to have school like the week leading up to March Madness.
Well, yeah, because I know. And they changed the March Madness format. I hate it. They're not starting it on Thursday now. They started on Friday. So it goes first round Friday, Saturday, second round Sunday, Monday.
What?
Yeah. All the first 4 games are played on a Thursday too. I know, it's weird. I don't like it.
I don't like that at all.
Yeah, you used to. Yeah. Do you
have any clue why they did that?
No, I have no idea.
That's news to me. That's awful. That's just a terrible decision.
Me and Caleb were arguing over it, and because you know how he doesn't really know anything, so I was just like, "You're wrong. Like that's never how they do it." And he's like, "No, they changed it this year," and sure enough, they did change it. So he was right on that one. But yeah, I was just as shocked as you are. So,
well, whatever. So on to the ACC. This was easily the hardest one to pick, just because your Blue Bloods are not Blue Bloods this year. Duke is still on the outside looking in. I think they're probably going to make the tournament, assuming they beat Louisville. But outside of that, North Carolina has played their way kind of onto like the 8, 9, 10 line, which is fine. Even a team like Clemson that is normally pretty good is okay. Virginia is the best team. They won the regular season, but they're still just the 16th team in the AP poll. The ACC had such a weird down year that I had no idea where to go with this, but I settled on Virginia and North Carolina. North Carolina is the 6th seed. They've got a pretty easy path of Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, and then onto the semifinal, where I think Florida State's going to get upset, just because that all the time whenever I see Florida State with expectations, they just always plummet. Like last year in the ACC tournament, lost. 2 years ago, they were part of one of the 4-13 upsets, if I believe correctly. So I just have a feeling that Duke might knock off Florida State to take North Carolina on in the semifinal, but then ultimately Virginia is going to beat whoever they play in the ACC championship, just because that's what Tony Bennett and Virginia does.
Yeah.
But there's nothing about this tournament that excites me. There's nothing that makes me want to watch the ACC tournament over any of the Big 12 or Big 10.
Yeah, it's definitely not as an exciting tournament as it normally is in past years. But yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think Virginia wins it. I do think I had Florida State making it on their side and Virginia Tech, and then I had Virginia Tech beating Florida State. I actually watched a couple of Virginia Tech games. They defend really well.
And they play fast.
Yeah, they play fast and defend extremely well. They don't. I don't know if they necessarily they get in you and get a lot of fast break points, but in their half court offense, they like to slow the game down and run a play. I think their coach is Buzz Williams. I've always been a big.
No, he left for Texas A&M.
Oh,
fun story about Buzz Williams.
When I was watching, I thought their coach was him. He looked exactly like him.
Fun story about Buzz Williams. So one of my favorite teachers of all time, Mary Means, she was my foods teacher. She recently remarried like 2 or 3 years ago. They're both retired, but his son-in-law is Buzz Williams.
Oh.
So they used to go to like every game. They would always get Marquette and Virginia Tech gear. But I was in her class when he took the Texas A&M job.
Oh. Okay.
But Virginia Tech is a young and up and coming coach.
Yeah.
I want to say it's one of Duke's old assistants, but I can double check that.
Yeah, but anyway, when the game I watched them, they impressed me, and I know they have a couple seniors on their team. I don't know. I like picking teams who have a lot of experience, a lot of veteran seniors who are maybe our fifth years who know the drill, who know what it's like to play in these type of tournaments. And so I have them making the championship, but ultimately losing to Virginia.
Yep. So their head coach is Mike Young. He was at Wofford for 17 years. The head coach there. And that's a team that you always hear of come March.
Yeah, Wofford's always like a 15, 14 seed.
So on to the Big East. This is another league that I think is always so easy to predict just because the Big East is always underrated, in my opinion. They always send a lot of pretty good teams to the tournament. This year they had a bit of a down year, like Butler or Xavier aren't near as good as they normally are. Neither is Marquette. But Villanova and Creighton are both head and shoulders above all the other teams in the conference. Creighton will be most likely a 3 seed. Villanova is going to be a 2 seed in the tournament. So I'm just going to take Villanova over Creighton in the championship, and I think that's just that's one of those leagues where that tends to always happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's also what I took. I don't know much about all these teams except for that DJ Carton plays for Marquette.
Yep.
So I knew that.
From Bettendorf.
Yep. I know I think I've heard of UConn's they're all right. Their coach is pretty good, Bobby Hurley, or maybe it's Danny. It's the one that didn't play at Duke.
Yeah.
He was the old coach at Rhode Island. But he's kind of a fiery coach. He gets fired up a lot. So I didn't really know. I had a tough time picking between Creighton and UConn, but I chose Creighton. I think they're the better team in that one, and then I chose Villanova over Creighton as well.
Creighton is playing with some turmoil too.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
With their head coach Greg McDermott making some questionable remarks, and I think he is remaining he's self-suspended.
Well, yeah, he's coaching them now. He just had like a 4-day suspension, a little bit. He offered to resign, and they didn't want him to do that. So he's gonna continue to coach. But I also wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this season you might see him leave.
So before we get into the SEC and Pac-12, I think we should talk about how Gonzaga did win the West Coast Conference Championship last night. They trailed to BYU by 15.
Yeah, I watched.
Came back and won.
I watched that whole game, and it just kind of made me. Gonzaga's been my early favorite from the start, and that game just kind of made me solidify my decision even more, because they just have all these players who, when they need someone to make. I mean, Jalen Suggs had they were tied, and he just had 10 points in a row, and all of a sudden, or 9 points in a row. All of a sudden, it's a 9-point lead, and BYU can never come back. And the shots he was making were just absolutely insane. Shots you see from a veteran senior, or like someone who's been doing this for a long time, and he's been doing this for however many games, 20 games, and it just kind of solidified my decision even more. They're deep. Their starting five is really good, and I think this is one of Mark Few's best teams he's had.
I think it's easily the top.
Yeah, they've had a lot of great teams, and it's hard I don't like picking undefeated teams to win the whole thing, but man, they usually don't ever get these top 3 freshmen. They just have all these seniors and then maybe one good freshman that they got. But man, his team is legit, and I don't know. I'm gonna roll with them.
Yeah, I'll be pulling for him, but I could see both sides of the coin, because I could see oh wow, they were trailing to BYU by 15, but I tend to look at it the other way. Like, this team has just rolled through everyone, so them trailing is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Just so they can have some adversity and get ready. But I think they're a lock for the Final Four, which means you should probably pick against them because those are always the teams that get upset. But Gonzaga they're going to be fun to watch in the tournament.
I agree.
I'm hoping they get because Oklahoma State's probably going to be a 4 seed. I hope they're in the same region, so we get a Cade Cunningham Gonzaga Sweet 16 matchup.
That would be great.
That's what I'm hoping for. In the SEC is probably the next two we're gonna go are just always the worst conference championships. I never really watch them. I have no interest in really any of the teams. I just went Alabama over Arkansas. I think those are head and shoulders above the two best teams in that league. Alabama's been in the top 10 all year. They're a real fun team to watch, and Arkansas came on as of late, and they're ranked actually in the top 10 also. They're 8th. But other than that, there are no teams in the SEC in the top 25, or even, I guess, LSU and Tennessee are receiving a few votes in the top 25. But those two teams are just head and shoulders above everyone, and bearing any upset or bearing, I guess, I could see them having a lack of motivation because they've kind of locked themselves into where they're at seed-wise. But I think Alabama will win. They've played at least once this season for sure. They played once back in January, and Alabama won by 31. And then they played recently just in mid-February, and Arkansas won by 15. So in the championship, if they meet, it'll be a rubber match. But I'm going to take Alabama just because I'm more familiar with them, and I think that Nate Oates is probably the best coach in the SEC.
I actually have the number 3 seed LSU beating number 4 seed Tennessee. I don't really know why I did this. I was just kind of rolling through and just picking teams. I don't know. I don't ever like picking for Bama in basketball, especially. I don't really know why. I also do like Tennessee. They have a coach that's been there for quite a while. I know they have a couple good.
They've got Rick Barnes, old Texas coach.
They got a couple good freshmen on their team because I like to look at mock drafts because of my Thunder, so I see all these freshmen. And Tennessee has a couple good young ones that I always see. But LSU, I don't really know why I picked them. I just kind of rolled with. I know they have a freshman named Cameron Thomas who's pretty good. So that's kind of the basis of my decision. I just kind of pick, all right, who's the best player out of all these guys, and I ultimately went with him. This is probably the one I'm going to be dead wrong on. So I don't know. I don't really pay attention to the SEC as much.
In a year where the Big 12 and Big 10 are so good, it's so hard to pay attention to any other league. Or even when a team like Drake and Loyola. I enjoy following those teams more than I do the Pac-12, just because they're more local, and I think it's just honestly pretty equal basketball. But onto the Pac-12, they've got just 2 teams in the top 25. They've got USC at 24. Colorado's actually the highest-ranked team at 23. They have won 4 in a row. Oregon's won 5 in a row. So the usual suspects for that conference. But I have... in my predictions, I've got USC over, I believe, Colorado. Let me check. Nope, USC will play Colorado in the semifinals. So I've got USC over Oregon, the 1 seed. Evan Mobley's fun to watch. Big men tend to do well in these conference championship settings. But other than that, I don't have too much analysis, I'll be honest.
I actually had UCLA over Oregon in the semifinals, and then USC over Colorado, and then I picked UCLA to beat USC. Yeah, I would have to say this. I don't really know why. I just kind of wanted to roll. I hadn't picked an upset yet for any of these other major conference tournaments, so I just I'm going to pick UCLA. And I did look at Oregon's record, and they nothing really stood out to me. So I'm like, they're going to be a 1 seed that's probably might get bounced early. I don't really know. Yeah, I just didn't have any. I don't have really many a meaning behind this pick, but.
And part of me is going to be cheering for UCLA really hard, just to maybe wedge Dana Altman out of Oregon. Because there is, in our next segment, like we'll talk about, Iowa State's most likely going to be looking for a new coach tomorrow morning. And Dana Altman, there's been some smoke. I don't know if there's a lot of fire, but there's been smoke to that. But I think we're going to play a song, and then we will come back and talk about some potential replacements for Steve Prohm, and if maybe they should replace him at all. I know what Aaron's thoughts on this are. But until then, we're going to play a song called Is She by the Gentle Giant. We're back on A Dorm Divided on KSTM 88.9, The Storm, and we were just arguing off air about whether Iowa State should keep Steve Prohm or not. I think Aaron just wants Iowa State to keep Prohm just because he wants Iowa State to stay bad, and he knows that.
No, I'm a big Steve Prohm guy. I think he's a good coach. I don't see the reason for them to get rid of him yet. I feel like if they get rid of him, things are only going to get worse. You've kind of hit rock bottom. Let him do his thing and rebuild it back up. Because if you get rid of him, you're going to hire a guy from like Northeastern University or Drexel University or one of these other no-name mid-major schools that Jamie Pollard likes to do that barely ever work. But he's going to try to do that because it happened to work with Matt Campbell. So you're going to see that happen. You're going to see him. You're going to see all of your good players leave. Maybe all the guys that you just got, your couple 4-stars that I know you're going to get. And then you see all these guys go. And, now all of a sudden you're bad for 4 years because you called for Steve Prohm's head. But if you keep him, then there's still a possibility you don't necessarily lose anyone. You probably will lose some guys, like Solomon Young will probably go.
Yeah, he's already announced he's gone.
Okay, so but he wasn't a big problem anyway. Plus, you lose your best freshman about 6 games in. I mean, I see a 500 team next year. I see it. I don't get it why they would fire him. I do think they're going to fire him, but I also think they're going to hire a no-namer, and then things are just going to be worse.
I legitimately think if he comes back next year, they go 0-18 again.
That's not going to happen. There's no way.
I don't see the team getting any better from where they're at right now.
If they were to lose, I think they should keep him. If things are still crappy by the time conference play starts, then freaking yank him.
So
get him out.
So do you want to hear how many 4-year players have been under Steve Prohm that he recruited?
Well, probably that he recruited. You got Solomon Young. You got...
And the list stops there. Solomon Young is the only 4-year guy.
How many years has he been here? What?
5.
This is his 5th year?
Every recruit that he's had.
So that recruiting class would have been the only recruiting class that would have been all his.
But even then, they have only one junior that's been there all 3 years. All 3, Halliburton, Horton Tucker went to the NBA. Zion Griffin and Jacoby Long transferred. Terrence Lewis transferred.
Trey Jackson will be a 4-year player. You got a lot of 4-year players right now. Xavier Foster will be a 4-year player. Rasir Bolton, I'm going to count him because he was at Penn State for 1 year. He'll be a 3-year player for you. I don't know. I just don't see it. It's not his fault that Tyrese Halliburton was a diamond in the rough. It's also not his fault that Taylor Horton Tucker left, even though he shouldn't have. That was a stupid decision on Horton Tucker's part. I'm not saying he would have stayed all 4 years, but the kid averaged 10 points a game and decided to go to the NBA and was like the 60th pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why he left. Lindell Wigington got undrafted. I don't know why he left. All these guys left that didn't even, like, I don't know. They shouldn't have never even left, but they did because they all thought they were going to make the NBA.
So Wigington should have stayed, but the reason that he left is because Prohm benched him.
Because he deserved to be benched. He was the guy bringing your team down.
Wigington,
he was a hothead and he had an ego.
No doubt. He
yeah.
had an ego.
See, that's Prohm being like, I'm not going to put up with this stuff.
Well, that's
good for him because that's what Fran would have did the exact same thing too.
But that's Prohm's deal for recruiting, knowing that he had that risk, because these guys all know each other. These head coaches all know the AAU coaches. They know what goes on. They know the type of guy that they're recruiting, and that's what Fred didn't do. Fred didn't bring those guys in if he didn't think they could work. Like Royce White was a train wreck at Minnesota, and he brought in Royce knowing that he could trust him, knowing that he could turn him around, turn his attitude around, And that's where...
Yeah, but that's a different story because Royce Wright could lead a team by himself if the right players were behind him, which is what he did, but they were only like a 9 seed.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's like not bad.
This is the one area where I do feel bad for Prohm, is he replaced Fred Hoiberg, who had one of the greatest 5-year tenures of any Iowa State coach ever, and probably one of the greatest 5-year tenures of anyone who's never coached a game of basketball in their life, like their first 5 years. So he had a bunch of expectations, and he kind of had to take risks on guys he might not have otherwise taken risks on, but he knew that when he took the job. And you can make excuses for him all you want, but he still inherited a top 5 team in the country, and they ended up a 5 seed. And the next year,
he did not inherit a top 5 team. I don't know if you remember this. They lost to UAB in the tournament.
But they were...
That was all... what's his face? Prohm's never done that.
But they were...
The year they lost to Ohio State was good.
But when Prohm got there, they were still an AP top 5 team.
Not at the beginning of the season.
Because when they had to come back against Iowa, the 20-point comeback, they were ranked 4th. So either they opened up at 5 or 6.
Yeah, but I know they opened up in the top 10, but I think they also took into consideration that year that Prohm was a new coach. Yeah. And dealing with all those players, that's it's an easy way. It's a good way to ease in a new coach with all these senior veterans, and you can just kind of trust them and rely on them.
No, and that's what I mean. He inherited such a good situation.
Yeah, and sometimes that's hard to do though.
No doubt.
And they arguably, because they went to the Sweet 16, or
they went to the Sweet 16 that year.
And who'd they lose to?
Virginia.
Okay, so then you got stuck with a 4 seed. Played a really good Purdue team. I think they played Purdue that year. The
next year.
Yeah. So then so you see all this. I don't know. I just don't see the point yet. I see you wait.
I think most coaches get 3 years. And Prohm, I think rightfully so, Prohm's 3 years started once Monte Morris, Naslong, Matt Thomas, and Deontay Burton graduated. Because those were Fred's guys. And then after that was the start of Prohm's tenure. And Prohm has had 3 years, and each year has gotten consistent. No, Prohm's had 4 years. This was his 6th season. So each season since then has gotten consistently worse. So Lindell Wigginton's freshman year, they missed the tournament, but they looked like a good team.
Yeah, and the next year they were good.
The next year
they were good.
They were talented, but underachieved.
I don't...
They still got upset by an 11th seed in the tournament.
Yeah, but they won the Big 12 championship. I don't know. Ohio State was a really good team that year.
That's one of those things.
I do think that Ohio State was actually good.
No, that was a
year.
good team. But
yeah,
that's one of those things where it's hindsight, because you look back and they won a Big 12 tournament, but they lost the last 9 games of the regular season leading up to that when they were a projected 2 seed.
That happens though. That's sometimes maybe Lindell Wigginton's injury was a part of that, and then him coming off the bench. Well, now if I'm Lindell Wigginton, I'm pissed off. I'm going to do my own thing, whatever. And that's when, honestly, maybe you completely just bench Wigginton. Maybe that was a Prohm thing, but obviously people were going to want to call for his head even more if he did that. So he had to play him, but he knew if he's playing him, stuff was going to hit the fan, and this wasn't going to end up good. You've had, I don't know, you had 3, and then all of a sudden these 2, Horton Tucker leaves and Wigginton leaves when they literally shouldn't have left. They should have stayed.
Yeah.
I guarantee Prohm even told them, hey, I want you to go to the draft, but I do think you have a bigger future. Your future is very brighter if you stay another year and improve your game, because we're going to lose Shayok and Weiler Babbs, so more opportunities are going to open up for you. And then what do you see? The one person that stays, Tyrese Halliburton, top 10 pick. And now, if I'm Wigginton and Horton Tucker, I'm well, I regret this decision. And Prohm should have told.
No, they should have come back, no doubt. But
and that's not. I don't think that's his fault. I think that's the agent's fault, who's just raising their egos even more.
But those are also guys that Prohm recruited, knowing.
I don't think
as an Iowa State fan going into that season, I knew full well that there's a very good chance that even if they didn't live up to expectations, that they'd go to the NBA. Because
I knew of Taylor Horton Tucker, and I was like, there is no way that this guy leaves. He's a 4-star recruit. He's like, there's just no way.
With a big ego.
Yeah, but not as a freshman. Come on. At Wigington, I knew the risk of it. I actually did figure Wigington was going to have a good year that year and go to the draft, but he had a down year, came off the bench, still decided to leave when he could have stayed another year and been he could have probably gone down as one of the best Iowa State players ever. I know he has one of the best solo play in Iowa State history where he posters that guy.
Yeah, on Oklahoma.
Yep. And so I think that's nothing. Like, I think Prohm knew the risk of them leaving maybe after 2 or 3 years, but after one for Taylor Horton Tucker, and then Wigington leaving after a down year is just like, well, I don't really know what you want me to do. Like, that's not my fault. I got good guys that wanted to leave right away.
So I don't feel bad about the Horton Tucker Wigington Parks. He knew the risk. I do feel bad for him that Halliburton was so good that he had to leave after 2 years.
But if I'm Halliburton, I'm that like, I don't blame Halliburton for leaving.
No, neither do I. But I don't think Prohm expected Halliburton to be good enough to leave after 2 years.
Yeah.
He was. So when I watched that team a ton in 2018, and I said the entire time, like, it doesn't really matter what Wigington and Horton Tucker do. Halliburton's going to be the one that's here for 4 years to build a legacy. Because I thought that he was a very, very good college player that maybe wouldn't have necessarily the NBA game, and he's completely proven me wrong. And it took only like half a season to see that, oh yeah, this guy was going to be in the NBA for sure. And I don't think he had any clue. That was going to happen. But I think, all in all, Iowa State's going to lose tonight, and Steve Prohm is going to lose his job by next week. And I wrote down some potential replacements for him, and I have them in categories. So the first category is my dream candidates, but are very long shots. So first, you just have to start with Fred Hoiberg. Fred Hoiberg's at Nebraska. The experiment hasn't worked out yet. As much as it pains me to say, he loves Nebraska. He always has. His grandfather played football there. He has family there, and he enjoys it there. I don't think he's coming back.
Nope, he's staying in the Big Ten.
I want him to. And even if he did, I don't think it could work out as well as the first time. That's just my opinion. I don't think Fred was as good of a coach as people remember. He was a really good recruiter, really good personality, and he rejuvenated Iowa State basketball and Hilton Magic, but I don't think a second experiment with him would work as well as it did the first time. But it would be whatever. It'd be so much better than what they have right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just don't see the point of rehiring a coach who's done absolutely nothing at Nebraska, has got been the worst team in Nebraska the last 2 years. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Then there's Dana Altman. There has been smoke about him leaving Oregon. Dana Altman coached at Creighton for like 12 years before Greg McDermott did, before taking the Oregon job. He has kids and grandkids all in Omaha. So the main reason that there's been smoke about him coming back is Altman leaving to go be closer to his family at Iowa State, take a job in the Midwest. He's a Midwest guy. I still don't know how realistic it is to leave a pretty good situation in Oregon where he's making the tournament every year. He has his own identity. He has his own culture, his own team. It wouldn't make sense from a basketball perspective, but if it's a family perspective, that'd be awesome. I would take him in a heartbeat, but I'm still not counting on it. And then my final category for a long shot is Porter Moser, head coach of Loyola Chicago. I think he's found his spot. He's old. He's like 60 years old. I think he's going to stay there until he retires, unless a school like Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, Michigan, Indiana, one of those schools comes calling. I don't think his dream job is Iowa State, as much as I would love him. I think he would be a fantastic coach with a defensive identity that hasn't been at Iowa State since the early 2000s with Larry Eustachy. I would love him, but it's not happening.
Yeah, I don't think any of those guys are coming there. I just don't. For Hoiberg, honestly, is probably your best bet, but I don't. Yeah, he's given Nebraska 2 years. I don't think he wants to leave yet. Dana Altman just won the regular season Pac-12. They were regular season champs, excuse me. They've been good for as long as I can remember. As long as I can remember. Loyola Chicago, you just don't see a team, a good mid-major team who's now starting to win their conference every year. You don't see a coach like that.
Starting to be top 20.
Yeah, you don't see a coach like that leave because he's building something there huge.
And not necessarily don't leave, but don't leave just for any situation. Like Shaka Smart, when he was at VCU, I'm sure he got calls from schools like Iowa and Iowa State every year. Iowa State, Nebraska, teams that like have been good before but aren't always going to be good. He waited for the perfect opportunity for a school like Texas to open up, and that's where I think Moser's waiting for Tom Izzo to retire or Coach K to retire, something like that, just because he's that big of a mid-major coach. The next category I have is would like, but probably not, which is my first one, Jerome Tang, the Baylor assistant coach who has been at Baylor for 18 seasons. If there's one thing that I want in a coach, it's someone who can coach. I don't care about the recruiting. There is so much talent in college basketball right now, whereas you see with Iowa, you're going to get talent pretty much no matter what. Fran McCaffrey's never been like an outstanding recruiter. Luka Garza was just a 3. I guess Garza might have been a low 4-star. But you got Garza, you got Bohannon, who was a 3-star. Joe Wieskamp was a 4-star. He landed recruits, but McCaffrey is more prided on his coaching ability rather than recruiting. Iowa State's tried out the experiment with Prohm, where he's a very good recruiter. No doubt about it. He sent so many guys into the NBA, but has exactly 2 NCAA tournament wins to show for it. I think Iowa State needs to get a culture guy who's been under Scott Drew since the start. Scott Drew is, I don't know if you know this, but Baylor used to be the worst college basketball program ever.
Yeah, they weren't very good.
In the early 2000s, and now he has blossomed them into a perennial Big 12 power, perennial Elite 8 team. I think he's made 3 Elite 8s. If you're going for an assistant at a Power 5 level, I think you have to poach over and take Scott Drew's top assistant who's been there since 18 years. I think that's the dream as far as assistants go. But again, I'm not counting on someone who is probably, he coached high school basketball in Texas for like his entire life. So he's a Texas guy through and through, and it's hard to poach someone like that. The next one, John Beilein, I just added him in for fun. I don't think he's coaching ever again, but he recently just left the Cavs. There was some sort of scandal. He was the Michigan coach for a long time. I think that'd be a pretty good fit. He's one of the best, probably top 25 college basketball coaches of the last 10 years, but I don't think he's coming back to take the Iowa State job, especially since he's so old, and it's probably going to be a 3 or 4 year rebuild, no matter whoever takes over the program. I'll kind of fly through these since we're short on time. Wes Miller, the head coach of UNC Greensboro, he's 35 years old, from the Roy Williams coaching tree. If Iowa State's poaching from a small school, I want guys who were involved with big-time coaches. There's a difference between Steve Prohm and Wes Miller, because Steve Prohm came from a coaching tree of an Alabama guy who's not even coaching anymore. Wes Miller came from Roy Williams, and there's a difference there as far as culture goes and as far as coaching ability goes. And that doesn't guarantee that he's going to be an incredible coach, but I think there's a difference between stealing from a small school guy that was always a small school guy and stealing from a small school guy that came from a Power 5. Up next, Nate James, Duke assistant. I think it's always smart to just poach big assistants that are, I know he's looking for kind of a Power 5 job. I think Ames, Iowa is a good place because it has been, as seen in football, it's got a rampant fan base that leads to recruits, and with high-notch facilities, they usually have, like Iowa State has a good chance every year in the Big 12 if they have a good team, just because of just how the Big 12 is. Whenever they're good, they're always in contention. I think that could be a good landing spot for him. My favorite coach, and what would be my top choice, is Craig Smith out of Utah State. He's been there for a long time. He's been there for like 18 years, and he's definitely not at a stopping point. Utah State is not like anyone's final destination, and if he's looking to make a jump, I think that would be an awesome place for him to land up. And then the final person that I have in this category of would like but probably a little unrealistic, Micah Shrewsbury, the Purdue top assistant coach. And that's where, in the same realm as Scott Drew, I just respect Matt Painter so much as a head coach, and I think that his head coaching ability is incredible, even if his ability to recruit isn't that high not. Like, I think what Iowa State needs is someone who can just outcoach the other. And that's what, I mean, Scott Drew came into Hilton Coliseum and outcoached Fred Hoiberg like 2 or 3 different times. And that's someone who you like to have, not someone who's going to bring in flashy recruits like Steve Prohm did.
Mm-hmm.
And now here is, I think, where the next Iowa State head coach is going to be found. It's the realistic and probably would accept the job, Darian DeVries from Drake. Just makes too much sense. He's from your hometown. He's been coaching Drake for, I believe, 3 seasons now.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to take them to an NCAA tournament. Undefeated season throughout February. It's one of those positions that makes too much sense because it reminds me of when Greg McDermott took the job back in 2008 or maybe 2007. Took UNI to the national tournament. Had him up and coming, Iowa guy, Midwest guy, rose up to take a position at Iowa. Hopefully, DeVries would go better than McDermott did because that was a failed experiment, but I don't think he would turn this job down. But if they go to him, I'm not sure. Another Drake name, Nico Medved. I don't know if you know that name.
That was the old coach.
He was the coach before DeVries, and he's at Colorado State now. I think he would be someone that would maybe make the trip back. As I said with Utah State, Colorado State isn't really a landing spot by any means. That's kind of a stepping stone. And Medved isn't one of those coaches at a smaller program that is being necessarily sought after, so I don't think there'd be too much competition for him. But then again, I'm not sure. And then the final person that I have in this category, Kevin Kruger, son of Lon Kruger, assistant coach at UNLV. I think I love coaches' sons coming up. Like, I think they always work. You've got the Hurleys, you've got the Millers. Pitino hasn't really worked out, although Minnesota's been okay. I think getting Kevin Kruger in the Big 12 to be able to play his dad 2 times a year would be awesome. And I think you try and get on him before Big School does. And then I've got one more category, and I know that you're going to hate this, and it's the please no. Like, under no circumstances hire him. TJ Otzelberger, former Fred Hoiberg assistant. He has done nothing at UNLV. He was a good coach at South Dakota State, but that was just because he had Mike Daum, who was the best player of any mid-major that year.
Mm-hmm.
Once Mike Daum left, South Dakota State fell apart. He went to UNLV and has done nothing. Jeff Hornacek. He's coached in the NBA. It would make a lot of sense, but that guy's an awful coach. Have you ever watched a Jeff Hornacek game? Those teams are messes. He coached the Suns when they were awful, the Knicks when they were terrible. I do not want Jeff Hornacek, even though he went to Iowa State. I don't think he would take the job, but if he wanted to, I wouldn't offer it to him. We talked about this at practice last night. Jamal Tinsley, Marcus Fizer, no. They have no coaching experience. Marcus Fizer has a massive ego, and I don't think he would work out at all.
Jamal Tinsley would be great.
I'd like it, but how many kids?
Everyone would love it. You'd get all your. I mean,
how many kids in Florida right now do you think know who Jamal Tinsley is?
Probably.
Me and you know who Jamal Tinsley is because he's like an Iowa State legend. That recruits aren't going to really care who Jamal Tinsley is. I don't think it's not going to have the same effect that Juwan Howard's had at Michigan.
Well, yeah, but recruits aren't going to care. Probably didn't care who Steve Prohm was.
But they cared who Fred Hoiberg was.
Well, that's because he came. It's because he just got hired to be a NBA coach. Yeah. But like when you see a normal, like I feel like kids of that, like yeah, they're not going to know of him, but when they see him, be like, oh, who's this Jamal Tinsley dude? Oh, he was a point guard for the Grizzlies for a long time. Knows NBA.
I would love if Jamal Tinsley gets an assistant coaching job at a big D2 school, small D1, has success there, builds his way up to an Iowa State head coaching job, but I don't think you offer. So Hoiberg had never coached before coming to Iowa State, but he was in an NBA front office at least. I don't know what Tinsley's done since playing in the NBA, but I doubt it's been coaching. Actually, no. I think he's been like player development for like AAU stuff. So even then, that's too risky for me, especially when I think right now you need an established guy. And then finally, for the please no current Iowa State assistants. This staff has failed miserably, and I think promoting any of them would just be an awful mistake, and I don't think Jamie Pollard's going to do it, thankfully. But yeah, that's all I've got. And there's definitely more candidates out there. There's a list of...
It's going to end up being a candidate you never heard of that was, like I said, coaching Drexel University or Colgate or Northeastern University or Morehead State. Like all those teams who get the 15 seeds at the tournament, you're going to hire one of them. We'll see what we got next.
So here's an article that I was reading earlier today, and the top non-Big 12 assistant, Brian Michelson from Gonzaga. He played there, and he's coached there, and he is the head assistant coach now. But I have a feeling that he's just going to stay there and take over few when he retires.
Yeah,
and that's what's so hard with the big schools is all these big schools that have elite head coaches, they're just old. Coach K, Roy Williams, their top assistants aren't going to want to leave because they want the Duke job when it opens up. And same thing with Brian Michelson and Gonzaga. But if they could hit a home run with this, that'd just be awesome. But like you said, I don't want someone from Murray State, or I don't want these young and up-and-coming head coaches that haven't really been involved in a big program before. I think you need someone who understands how a big program works and someone who can draw an inbounds play, because that is the one thing that Steve Prohm cannot do, and it drives me absolutely crazy. But I think we went a little over on time. I know I get fired up when I talk about Iowa State basketball, especially now. But this is exactly how I talked about Iowa State football before they let go of Paul Rhodes. So let's hope Jamie Pollard makes a home run hire and rejuvenates the Iowa State basketball program. But until then, Aaron and I are going to be watching a lot of basketball over the next week before we do. Next week, we're talking about nothing but March Madness.
Yep.
So we're going to be filling out brackets all day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we'll be ready to talk about it next week.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is a Dorm Divided on 88.9 KSTM The Storm. For Aaron Price and Jake Brown, we want to thank you for listening.